She woke up before the alarm, just like every other day. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made her chest feel tight. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, landing on the edge of her desk where files were stacked neatly. Her phone lay face down, already buzzing with unread messages from people who needed decisions, approvals, answers. She ignored it for a moment and turned her head toward the small bed beside hers. Her son was awake. He always woke up early. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, his hands folded over his chest. No sound came from him. No good morning. No questions. No complaints. Just silence. She sat up slowly and watched him. As a CEO, she was trained to notice details. Small changes. Patterns. But with her son, nothing ever changed. His silence had been part of their life for so long that it felt permanent, like the walls of the apartment. Doctors had used long words. Therapists had tried different methods. Some said he would speak one day. Others avoided giving hope. She had listened to all of them, nodded, paid the bills, followed instructions. Still, every morning felt the same. She reached out and gently touched his arm. He turned his eyes toward her, calm but distant. She smiled, trying to keep it warm. "Time to get up," she said softly, even though she knew he would not answer. She helped him dress, choosing comfortable clothes instead of the stiff ones she usually preferred. Today was different. She had cleared her schedule. No meetings, no calls, no emergencies, just one free day. The decision had come suddenly the night before, after she caught herself answering emails while sitting beside her son at dinner. He had been eating quietly, and she had barely looked at him. The guilt had hit her hard, so she made a plan, a simple one. They would go to a park. It felt strange even thinking about it. Parks were for people with time, for parents who laughed easily and stayed longer than planned. Her life had always been about control and efficiency. But something inside her felt tired of fighting. Maybe fresh air would help. Maybe seeing other children would spark something in him. Or maybe it would do nothing at all. Still, staying inside felt worse. They left the apartment late in the morning. She locked the door carefully, checking it twice out of habit. Outside, the city moved fast like it always did. Cars honked. People rushed past with phones in hand. She held her son's hand firmly as they crossed the street. He followed without resistance, his grip light but steady. During the drive, she talked. She always did. She spoke about the weather, the trees they would see, the ducks near the pond. She described everything as if words could build a bridge between them. He listened, she thought, but his face gave nothing away. The park was larger than she remembered. She had not been to one since childhood. Trees lined the paths, their leaves moving gently in the breeze. Children ran across the grass, their voices rising and falling like music. Parents sat on benches, some watching closely, others lost in conversation. She felt out of place the moment she stepped inside. Her shoes were too polished, her posture too stiff. She scanned the area without meaning to, as if expecting a problem to solve. She guided her son to an empty bench near the playground and sat down. He climbed up beside her and placed his hands on his knees, his feet not quite reaching the ground. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. In meetings, she always had an agenda, a goal, a next step. Here, there was nothing to manage. Just time. Just her and her silent child. She watched other families. A mother tying a shoe. A father lifting his laughing daughter onto a swing. A group of children sharing snacks. The sounds were loud but comforting. Life happening without effort. Her son stared ahead, his eyes following the movement of the swings. He did not ask to join. He never did. She wondered if she should push him, encourage him, sign him up for something. That was her usual instinct. Solve, fix, improve. But today, she stayed still. Minutes passed. She checked her phone once, then forced herself to put away. She leaned back on the bench and closed her eyes for a second. The air smelled like grass and warm earth. It felt unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Her thoughts drifted to the office, to the glass walls, the quiet authority in her voice, the way people listened when she spoke. There, she was confident, respected, in control. Here, she felt exposed. Just another parent, unsure and waiting. She opened her eyes and looked at her son again. He had shifted slightly. His body leaned forward now, his attention fixed on something near the playground. She followed his gaze. A single father stood there, with a child not much older than her son. The man wore simple clothes, a little worn, but clean. He knelt on the ground, talking animatedly, using his hands to explain something. The child laughed and tried to copy him, stumbling and trying again. The CEO watched without realizing she was staring. There was something natural about the way the man interacted with his child. No rush, no pressure, just patience. When the child failed, the man smiled and tried again. When the child laughed, he laughed too. Her son leaned forward a little more. She noticed it immediately. Her heart skipped. He had never shown interest in other children before. He usually stayed inside his own world, untouched by noise or movement. But now, his eyes followed the man and child as they moved. His fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the bench. She held her breath, afraid that even noticing the change might make it disappear. The father glanced around and caught her son's gaze. He smiled, not in a forced way, just a simple, friendly expression. He nodded slightly, as if saying hello without words. The CEO stiffened, unsure how to react. She gave a small nod back. The man returned his attention to his child, continuing their game. Her son did not look away. She felt a mix of emotions she couldn't name. Hope, fear, confusion. She had seen specialists celebrate tiny steps before, only for progress to stop days later. She had learned to protect herself from disappointment. Still, this felt different. Time passed slowly. She did not check her phone again. She watched her son watch the world. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel the need to control what came next. She didn't know it yet. But this ordinary morning, this simple trip to a park, was the beginning of something that would change her life in ways no boardroom victory ever had. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the benches and the open grass. The park grew louder as more families arrived. Children ran past with bright balloons. Someone nearby opened a box of snacks, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through the air. The world felt alive, full of small sounds and easy laughter. She sat still, but inside, her thoughts moved quickly. Her son had not taken his eyes off the man and his child. The two of them were now trying to fly a small paper plane. It did not fly very far. It dipped and landed after a few feet. The child groaned in frustration, but the father only laughed and picked it up again. "Let's try once more," the father said in a calm voice that carried just enough for her to hear. There was no anger in his tone, no hurry, just patience. She noticed how different that felt from her own voice at home. She did not shout. She was not cruel, but she was often tense, always thinking about time. Even when she spoke gently, her mind was somewhere else. The father adjusted the wings of the plane carefully. He handed it back to his child and stepped behind, guiding his hands lightly. The child threw it again. This time, it flew farther, gliding across the grass before landing near the bench where she and her son were sitting. Her son's body stiffened for a second. The plane had landed close to his feet. The child ran toward them to retrieve it, but slowed down when he saw her son sitting there. He looked uncertain, as children sometimes do when they sense something different. The father followed a few steps behind. "It landed here," the child said softly. Her son looked down at the paper plane, but did not move. The CEO felt the familiar pressure rising inside her. She almost reached out to pick up the plane herself and hand it back quickly, just to avoid any awkwardness. But before she could act, the father stepped closer. He crouched down at a respectful distance from her son. "That was a strong throw," he said, smiling gently. It almost broke a record. Her son's eyes shifted from the plane to the man's face. There was no pity in the father's expression, no confusion, just a simple, friendly look, as if he expected nothing and everything at the same time. The father picked up the plane slowly and held it up. "Do you think it can go even farther?" Silence. The CEO felt her heartbeat in her ears. The father did not rush to fill the silence. He stayed there, holding the plane, waiting as if silence was a normal answer. After a moment, he stood up. "We'll try again," he said to his child, not sounding disappointed at all. They walked back to their spot on the grass. She exhaled without realizing she had been holding her breath. Her son turned his head slightly, following them again. The father and his child prepared for another attempt. This time, the child looked back toward her son before throwing the plane, almost as if hoping he was watching. The plane flew higher and farther than before. The child cheered loudly. The father clapped once, not too hard, just enough to show pride. Something small shifted on the bench. Her son's lips parted for a second. It was not a word, not even a sound, but it was movement. She noticed because she always noticed. Her throat tightened. The father saw it too. He did not point it out. He did not react strongly. He simply gave a small nod toward her son, the kind adults give when they want to include someone without forcing them. "You want to try?" he called out casually, holding the plane up. She froze. This was the moment she usually feared. Invitations, expectations, the risk of refusal. Her son did not answer, but he did not look away either. The father waited a few seconds, then shrugged lightly. "Okay, maybe next time." There was no disappointment in his voice. He handed the plane back to his child, and they continued playing. The CO stared at the ground, her thoughts heavy. She wondered how many times she had unknowingly made her son feel like he had failed by expecting too much too quickly. How many therapy sessions had felt like tests instead of support? How many times had she smiled in front of doctors while her heart was breaking? She looked at the father again. His shoes were worn at the edges. His shirt was simple, sleeves rolled up. There was a tiredness in his face, the kind that comes from long days and little rest. But his eyes were soft when he looked at his child. He did not look like someone who had an easy life, yet he seemed calm. After a while, the child ran toward the small climbing structure. The father followed slowly, staying close but not hovering. The child climbed halfway and hesitated. "I'm here," the father said. Those two words were simple, but they carried weight. The CEO felt them in her chest. She realized she often told her son what to do, where to go, how to try again, but she rarely just said, "I'm here," without adding instructions. Her son slid off the bench suddenly. She sat up straight. He walked a few steps forward, stopping at the edge of the grass. He did not go near the climbing structure, but he stood there closer than before. The father noticed. He guided his child down from the structure and walked back toward the open space, not too close, just enough that the distance felt smaller. He picked up the paper plane again and looked toward her son. "Last try before lunch," he said lightly. Her son's fingers twitched at his sides. The father threw the plane gently, letting it glide in a wide arc. It landed a few feet away from her son. This time, no one moved. The child looked at her son, then at his father. The father gave a small nod, as if saying, "Let's wait." Seconds passed. Her son stepped forward. One step, then another. He bent down slowly and picked up the paper plane. Her breath caught in her throat. He stood there, holding it. The father smiled but stayed silent. The child watched with wide eyes. Her son looked at the plane for a long moment. Then, with an awkward but determined movement, he lifted his arm and pushed it forward. The plane did not fly very far. It dropped quickly to the grass. But it moved. The child clapped without thinking. "You did it!" he shouted. The father placed a gentle hand on his child's shoulder, lowering the volume. "Nice throw," he said softly toward her son. No cheering. No excitement that would scare the moment away. Just acknowledgement. Her son stared at where the plane had landed. And then, for the first time in years, a small sound escaped him. It was not clear, not a word anyone could understand. But it was there, a soft, surprised breath that sounded almost like the beginning of a laugh. The world seemed to stop. The CEO felt tears fill her eyes instantly. She pressed her lips together to keep from making a sound. She did not want to interrupt whatever fragile thing was happening. The father met her eyes briefly. There was no shock on his face. No dramatic reaction, just warmth, as if he had always believed this moment would come. The sound faded as quickly as it came. The small breath, almost like a laugh, disappeared into the noise of the park. Children kept running. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Life continued as if nothing special had happened. But for her, everything felt different. She sat frozen on the bench, afraid to move, afraid that even a blink might undo the moment. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. She wanted to rush forward, to hold her son, to tell him how proud she was. But something stopped her. A quiet instinct told her to wait. Her son stood still, staring at the grass where the paper plane had landed. His face showed no strong emotion, but his body looked lighter somehow, as if a weight had shifted inside him. The single father stayed exactly where he was. He did not clap again. He did not speak loudly. He simply nodded once, slow and calm, as if to say that what just happened was enough. The child beside him looked back and forth between the adults, confused by their silence. "Can we do it again?" the child asked. The father smiled. "Later," he said. "Let's give a break." He turned his attention back to her son. "Thanks for helping," he said gently. "That was kind of you." Her son did not answer, but he did not step back either. That alone felt like progress. The CEO finally stood up. Her legs felt weak, like she had run a long distance without realizing it. She walked slowly toward her son and stopped beside him. "That was nice," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Her son looked up at her for a brief moment. Their eyes met. It was quick, but was real. She swallowed hard. The father stepped back a little, giving them space. He seemed to understand without being told. They stood there in silence for a few seconds, the three of them forming an awkward but peaceful triangle. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the sound of leaves brushing against each other. "We should probably head out soon," the father said to his child. "Lunchtime." The child groaned but nodded. The CEO felt a sudden rush of panic. She was not ready for this to end. Without thinking too much, she spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. The father turned toward her. "For what?" he asked. She gestured toward her son, unsure how to explain. "For being patient," she said. "Most people aren't." He shrugged lightly. "Kids move at their own pace," he replied. "Sometimes we just have to slow down enough to notice." His words hit her harder than she expected. She nodded, pressing her lips together. They stood there again, unsure how to continue. She realized she knew nothing about him. His name, his story, his struggles. Yet he had just witnessed something deeply personal. "We come here often," he added. "Same time most weekends." She understood what he was offering without pressure, not a promise, just a door left slightly open. "So do we," she said, surprised at herself. She had never been to this park before today, but she meant it. The father smiled politely. He took his child hand and started walking toward the exit. The child looked back and waved. Her son watched him leave. He did not wave back, but his fingers lifted slightly, then dropped again. It was enough. They returned to the bench once more. She sat down slowly, her mind racing. She felt like she had just witnessed something fragile and rare, like a glass ornament that could shatter if touched too roughly. She wanted to talk to her son, to ask him how he felt, to ask if he liked the game. But she stopped herself. Questions had always felt heavy between them. Instead, she sat quietly beside him. Minutes passed. A bird landed near their feet, pecking at the ground. Her son watched it closely. When it flew away, he followed it with his eyes until it disappeared. She leaned back on the bench and let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, she did not feel the urgent need to call a doctor or book an appointment. She did not feel the pressure to analyze what had happened. She simply felt present. Eventually, she stood up. "Let's walk a little," she said gently. Her son stood, without resistance. They walked along the path together. She matched her steps to his, slowing down when he slowed, stopping when he stopped. It felt strange at first, like learning a new rhythm. They passed families, couples, joggers. No one paid special attention to them. She realized how often she had worried about how others saw her son, how his silence made people uncomfortable, how she carried that discomfort as her own. Here, in the open air, it felt smaller. They reached a small bridge over a shallow stream. She rested her hands on the railing and looked down at the water moving slowly over stones. Her son leaned forward beside her. "Water," she said softly. He did not respond, but he stayed. She smiled to herself. After a while, she checked the time. It was later than she realized. She thought about lunch, about home, about returning to their usual routine. Part of her didn't want to leave. As they walked back toward the car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not take it out right away. When she finally looked, there were several missed calls and messages. She locked the screen. They reached the car, and she opened the door for her son. Before getting in, he paused. He looked back toward the park. She followed his gaze. The playground was still visible in the distance. "We can come back," she said, her voice calm. He did not answer, but he nodded. It was small. It was quiet, but it felt like a promise. As she drove away, her hand steady on the wheel, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope, not loud or overwhelming, just enough to keep going. That night, the apartment felt different. It was still quiet, but the silence no longer felt heavy. She moved through the room slowly, noticing small things she usually ignored. A toy on the floor, a cup left on the counter, the hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds, ordinary sights. Yet they felt new. Her son sat at the small table, pushing pieces of food around his plate. He ate slowly like always. She resisted the urge to remind him to finish. She remembered the calm voice at the park, the waiting, the space. She sat across from him and ate quietly too. When dinner was done, she cleared the dishes without rushing. Normally, evenings were planned down to the minute. Bath time, reading time, emails, calls, catching up. Tonight, she let the clock decide. She brought out a box of old crayons and paper that had been sitting untouched in a drawer for months. She placed it on the table between them. "If you want," she said softly. She did not push the box closer. She did not watch his face too closely. She picked up a crayon herself and drew a simple line on the paper. Then another. Her son watched. After a few minutes, he reached for a crayon. He chose a blue one. His grip was tight at first, awkward. He made a short line, then stopped. She smiled, but kept her eyes on her own paper. They sat like that for a while, drawing without meaning. No pressure, no goal. Later, as she tucked him into bed, she paused at the door. "I'm here," she said. The words felt unfamiliar on her tongue. He did not respond, but his eyes stayed on her a second longer than usual. That night, she slept deeply. The next morning, she woke with a strange sense of clarity. The usual list of worries did not rush in right away. Instead, her thoughts went back to Park, to the paper plane, to the calm face of a stranger who had asked for nothing. At work, people noticed a change before she did. She listened more. She spoke less. In meetings, she no longer rushed to fill every pause. She allowed silence to sit. At first, it made others uncomfortable. Then they began to speak more honestly. During lunch, she found herself looking out the window instead of at her phone. She left the office earlier than usual. At home, she suggested a walk. Her son put on his shoes without protest. They returned to the park the following weekend at the same time. Her heart beat faster as they walked past the gate. She scanned the familiar paths, the benches, the playground. He was there. The single father sat on the grass, tying his child's shoes. He looked up and recognized him immediately. He smiled, not wide, not surprised, just warm. She felt relief she had not expected. They stopped a short distance away. She did not know what to say. She had led teams of hundreds, negotiated deals worth millions. Yet this fell harder. The father stood up and nodded. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. The children stood near each other, not touching, but aware. The father picked up a small ball this time and rolled it gently across the grass. It stopped near her son. No invitation, just an option. Her son looked at the ball. Then he pushed it back. The father's child laughed. They rolled the ball back and forth slowly. Sometimes it went crooked. Sometimes it stopped short. No one corrected it. She watched, her chest tight with emotion. After a while, the father sat on the grass. She joined him, keeping a respectful distance. They watched the children quietly. He likes it here, the father said. She nodded. So do I. They talked a little then, not about jobs or money, about small things. How tired mornings could be, how children surprised you, how patience was learned, not taught. She did not tell him who she was. He did not ask. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen without being measured. Weeks passed. The park became part of their routine. Some days her son stayed close. Other days, he wandered farther. Sometimes he made sounds. Sometimes he didn't. She stopped counting progress and started noticing moments. She learned to celebrate quietly. At work, she made changes. Real ones. She delegated more. She canceled meetings that did not matter. People whispered at first, confused by the shift, but productivity improved. So, did she? One afternoon, she received a call from the school. Her heart raced as she answered. He said a word today. The teacher said, her voice gentle but excited. Just one, during playtime. She closed her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. That evening, she took her son to the park. The father was already there. She told him what had happened, her voice shaking. He smiled and nodded. He was ready, he said simply. She realized then how much she had changed. Before, she would have wanted reasons, explanations, timelines. Now, she accepted the moment for what it was. They sat together as the sun lowered. The children played quietly nearby. Her son picked up a leaf and held it out. She took it. Thank you, she said. It was not a big word, but it was his. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not cry. She smiled. In that simple exchange, she understood something she had missed for years. Change did not arrive with noise. It arrived gently, and it stayed when you made room for it. Summer slowly began to fade, and the air in the park turned cooler in the evenings. The trees that once held bright green leaves started to change color. What began as one simple visit had now become a quiet tradition. Every weekend, she and her son walked through the same gate. Every weekend, they looked for the same familiar face. Sometimes a single father was already there. Other times, they arrived first and waited. There was no exchange of numbers, no detailed plans. Just trust that if life allowed, their paths would cross again. Her son had changed in ways that were small but steady. He still did not speak much. Some days, not at all. But he made more sounds now. Soft ones. Curious ones. When he wanted something, he pointed with more confidence. When he felt happy, his face showed it clearly. She stopped measuring his progress against other children. Instead, she measured it against yesterday. At work, people had begun to notice something else too. She no longer stayed late every night. She no longer answered emails during dinner. She had set boundaries that once felt impossible. At first, the board questioned her decisions. Investors wanted reassurance. Colleagues wondered if she was losing focus. But she wasn't. She was sharper than ever. Because for the first time, her mind was not split in two. She was present where she stood. One afternoon at the park, the single father sat beside her on the bench while the children played a slow game of rolling the ball again. You seem lighter, he said casually, watching the kids. She smiled. I feel lighter. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. There was a pause between them, but it was comfortable. After a moment, she spoke. I used to think I had to solve everything, she admitted. Every silence felt like a problem. Every delay felt like failure. He listened without interrupting. Now, he asked gently. She looked at her son, who was trying to balance the ball on his foot. Now I think he just needed space, she said. And maybe I did too. The father smiled. Sometimes we try so hard to protect them from the world that we forget to let them explore it. She nodded slowly. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. She received an invitation to speak at a major leadership event. It was important. High profile. The kind of event that would normally excite her. The date fell on a Saturday. The same time they went to the park. She stared at the email for a long time. Old habits whispered in her mind. This is important. This is your image. This is your career. Then she looked at the calendar on the wall, and she thought of the paper plane. That evening at the park, she told a single father about the invitation. Are you going? He asked. She looked at her son, who was sitting on the grass drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. No, she said quietly. I'm not. The father did not look surprised. Big decision, he said. She smiled. Maybe, but I made bigger ones. They just didn't look like this. That same evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, her son walked over to her holding the stick. He stood in front of her, his mouth opened. She held her breath. Mama, he said. It was soft, almost fragile, but clear. The world seemed to pause. The single father turned his head slowly, watching. She felt her knees weaken. Tears rushed to her eyes, but she did not move suddenly. She did not want to scare the moment away. I'm here, she whispered. Her son looked at her as if testing the word again. Mama, he repeated, stronger this time. She pulled him gently into her arms. The father looked away respectfully, giving them privacy without leaving. She held her son tightly, but not too tight. Years of waiting, years of doubt, all carried inside that one word. Later, when they sat again on the bench, she turned to father. I don't know how to thank you, she said honestly. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You changed something, she insisted. He thought for a moment. No, he said calmly. He was always capable. You just slowed down enough to see it. His words stayed with her long after that day. As months passed, their visits to the park continued. Sometimes they talked about simple things. Sometimes they sat in silence while the children played. She eventually shared more about her life. Not the titles, not the headlines, just the truth, the pressure, the loneliness that came with leadership, the fear of failing at the one role that mattered most. He shared his story too, how he had learned patience the hard way, how he had once tried to control everything, only to realize that control often pushed people further away. They were different in many ways, but in the park, none of that mattered. One afternoon, as winter approached, the father told her he might have to move to another part of the city for work. The news hit her unexpectedly hard. When? She asked. Soon, he replied. Nothing final yet. She nodded, trying to stay calm. That weekend, the park felt more precious than ever. The children played longer, laughed louder. Her son said a few more words that day. Simple ones. Ball. Go. Home. Each word felt like a gift. As the sky darkened, the father stood and brushed grass from his pants. If we don't see each other again, he said gently, keep coming here. She looked at him, her eyes steady. We will, she said. He smiled. There were no dramatic goodbyes. No promises they couldn't keep. Just a handshake. And understanding. Weeks later, the father and his child were gone, but she still brought her son to the park. They sat on the same bench. They rolled the same ball. Sometimes, her son would look toward the gate, as if remembering. She would squeeze his hand softly. I'm here, she would say. And now, sometimes he would answer. Mama here, he would reply. Her life remained busy. Her company continued to grow. She still made difficult decisions every day, but none of them felt as important as those quiet afternoons. She learned that success was not only measured in numbers or applause. It was measured in moments, in patience, in presence, in a small voice finally finding its way into the world. And every time she heard her son call her, she remembered the paper plane that started it all. A simple throw, a simple wait, a simple act of kindness that changed everything.